In this episode, we're going to deal with a common problem I run across with teaching all the time, modal interchange and whatnot, using chords from all kinds of different modes. Like in this example, which is in episode 1, which we talk about. So one of the questions I always get asked about this is, what scale do you use? Actually, it eventually becomes instinctive on what you do, and it depends on the sound you want. So we're going to deal with 2 chords that we've already dealt with in this series, and go back and watch those series if you have not in this playlist. Episode 1 through 4, I believe. I believe this is 5. I'll have to double check on that. But one of the biggest problems I found teaching this is a lot of the time people wanted a definitive what note scale to use when you're switching chords like that are not in this key. So I'm going to take Ionian and the 2 chords from Mixolydian. Now there's a definitive problem here, is we have all the chords of Ionian, that's our, considering that our parent scale, and then these 2 borrowed chords from Mixolydian, well, they also occur in other scales. The note choice often isn't as cut and dry as, say, this is the Mixolydian 5 and 7. Well, those also occur in different other scales, and I'm going to do an experiment here. I'm just going to use the A, the E minor, and a G, and see if you can hear any discontinuity when I do play something over this. So what happened here was there's a little bit of mixture between Mixolydian, Dorian, and Aeolian. And we're going to leave some of these scales out of this video, because we haven't really talked about Dorian in this series yet. However, these 2 borrowed chords occur in all these different scales. I'm not trying to make this overly complicated, I'm just trying to show you that stuff like this happens when you start dealing with big time modal interchange. A major, and suddenly a flat 6 is like, okay, where does that come from? Well, when we switch to that G from this major progression, okay, well, you have a couple of choices there as well with that flat 6. Something like a Mixolydian flat 6 fits that, and you're going to see a lot of crossover like this. A major, Mixolydian flat 6. It still works. You don't hear any discontinuity when you do that. So let's go over the first obvious choice scale when dealing with these 2 other chords, borrowing major. Mixolydian will work fine over these 2 chords. I'm just going to play block chords mostly to make this really simple. And this note choice has the raised 6, so it's going to sound kind of light. So I went from major and switched to Mixolydian. And it's going to sound kind of light because of that raised 6. I'm trying to play block chords and simple here. So I'm not a great keyboardist, but I'll try to do something to demonstrate this with these 3 chords. So I used A major over the A chord and then Mixolydian over the 2 other chords. Now, if you want a little bit less light feel, choose something like Mixolydian flat 6 when you hit the E minor or the G. Those 2 chords still fit that. So here's the scale. A major, maybe you're modally interchanging now. Mixolydian flat 6. A flat 6 will give you a sense of mystery kind of sound, mood. So you see there's an enormous amount of crossover when you're using borrowed chords. Even from parallel minor, you might temporarily get a Mixolydian flat 6 sound. The only difference is you're not locked into a scale. So Aeolian. These 2 chords occur in A Aeolian, or parallel minor. And we have an exercise in going through parallel minor chords in the first episode. So do this little experiment. Play A major, and then on the G, play Aeolian, and then the E, play Aeolian, E minor, I'm sorry. So you end up with this temporary flat 3 situation. which is going to be inevitable the more chords you start borrowing from parallel minor, which we'll cover later. But you'll notice there's no discontinuity when I play A major and then Aeolian. Sounds slightly more mysterious that way. So you might be seeing that note choice is actually going to be, what are you after? So if I use major pentatonic, for instance, it's going to sound super light. And actually very pleasant sounding. So still using block chords, this pentatonic sound, over these two other chords. So this is another choice when dealing with these two borrowed chords. And you might even answer that up with just plain major scale harmony. The point is that this note choice makes it sound very light. In fact, any pentatonic scale you form that fits over these chords will work, like such. And I don't want to talk about the different forms of pentatonic shapes right now, I'm just letting you know this will work as well when borrowing these two chords because there's no conflict. So note choice is actually more of the preference on what the sound you're looking for is the sound you want. So let's choose a basic major scale progression. 1, 6, 3, go to the borrowed flat 7, minor 5, then 1. And we'll use major for the first part and mixolydian flat 6 for when we use those two borrowed chords. So the first statement's a little light, and then the second statement becomes a little bit more mysterious. And so the note choice is actually really up to you. What are you looking for? Because I used mixolydian there, and then it was a little bit lighter than the previous one because I didn't use the flat 6, like mixolydian flat 6 produces. I'm not trying to make this complicated. The choice of notes is up to you because it depends on what sound you're looking for. If you use the flat 6 if you want a little bit of mystery. Use the raised 6 if you want a little bit lighter sound. Use pentatonics if you want a very light sound. And these are just general guidelines because it actually becomes more intuitive after a while, after you've been doing this a long time. Sometimes you're not even thinking about what scale to use. In fact, most of the time I'm not thinking about what scale to use them. It just so happens that something actually fits the mixolydian flat 6, for instance, shaped temporarily as I'm borrowing. It just so happens. That's why I said there's a lot of crossover between set scales like that and borrowing. And you're going to find with borrowing that you're going to actually produce some of the same sequences that you would with set scales like mixolydian flat 6. The only difference is that with borrowing, you're not glued to one scale and one sound. So that's the whole point of this episode, is what notes are you going to use is really going to be up to you because it's going to depend on the sound you're looking for. It's not about trying to complexify things for you. It's about you trying to get the sound you want.